All right, you've done it again. You've come to the wrong place at the wrong time, so it must be the wrong stuff. Guy Denton, how are you?
People just can't stay away from the wrong place, Matt. Quite clearly, and us included. It's great to be back with you.
That's right. You were gone for last week, so it's the first time we've talked in 2 weeks. Crazy things are happening. And you missed the whole JD Vance dogs and cats and geese scandal.
I did, in the most unfortunate timing imaginable. We didn't get to discuss that last week, nor did we get to reflect on the excruciating debate that we had to sit through 2 Tuesdays ago.
I mean, this could have been our Christine Ohm Cricket 2.0. We could have, had a lot of fun. Let me say, I do see a parallel here. Nobody cares about the geese that were allegedly killed in Springfield, Ohio, and you know what it reminds me of? Christine Ohm's goat. Remember that
That's true.
She killed a goat too, and nobody cared.
Yep. The real question, Matt, is: are they eating cricket in Springfield? Has anyone looked into that? Is that where cricket's remains was sent?
Well, the story is a gift that keeps on giving. Of course, you mentioned the debate. It came up in the debate with Trump. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. This has been like a 2 week long story now. And the latest shoe to drop comes from the Wall Street Journal, which had a pretty funny report. I'm going to play a clip here. This is from Morning Joe.
The Vance team and the Trump campaign have pointed to this police report, they said, that showed a neighbor in Springfield. A woman had reported her pet missing and suspected it might have been taken by a Haitian immigrant. What happened from there?
Well, the campaign has said they had demonstrable evidence that these pet kidnappings were happening, and they provided a document. So we went to the home of the woman who had reported her cat missing, and she was very apologetic. She found the cat missing 5 days later. It was in her basement, Miss Sassy, and she used her phone and her daughter to go next door and apologize to the Haitian immigrants living there. But when we approached her, she was wearing a Trump T-shirt and had a Trump poster. She was apologetic that she was mistaken and had helped originate some of these claims. But she still supports the former president very strongly, as do many people who live there.
So Miss Sassy, just to underline, was in the basement and not eaten by the Haitian neighbor?
Yeah. I mean, this became, I don't want to call it an international incident, but a national incident. And it turns out it was a woman who, Miss Sassy, was missing. There was someone else whose friend's daughter's cousin's uncle's brother said that the Haitians kidnapped their cat or something and put it on a Facebook post. I mean, but the thing is, you could forgive a normal citizen living in Springfield, Ohio for, we've all done that thing where we misplace something and then accuse somebody in our office of stealing it. And then we look like a jerk when it turns out that that didn't happen. But when someone like Donald Trump and JD Vance with these huge megaphones weaponize this story and use their huge megaphones to stir up racist discontent and anger and vitriol, that is, to say the least, irresponsible.
No, that's a key point. And the Wall Street Journal report, I did read it. It is excellent. Everyone listening to this should go out and read it if you missed it. I also heard that Kevin Williamson did a long report on Springfield in the Dispatch, which I haven't read yet, but which I've also heard is very funny and very good. The whole the contents of the report, if you read the whole thing, are really kind of a blackly comic reflection of what we saw play out in the aftermath of the election 4 years ago, and also sort of a grim premonition of what we might see play out again in November if Trump loses. What's fascinating about the report is how the reporters detail that Trump and Vance knew this was nonsense. People around them told them it was nonsense. There was never any factual basis for it. It was ludicrous on its face, and yet they embraced it anyway because they thought that by weaponizing it, it might help give them leverage in the states they need to flip this election. And clearly, well, it hasn't worked, but I think what it illustrates is that, as we've seen many times since 2016, Trump's devotees aren't concerned with reality. They're concerned with with the warped funhouse reality that Trump has built around his campaign. That's the world they want to live in. And it's so funny. It's funny that firstly, the news anchor in that clip couldn't keep it together when he heard the words Miss Sassy.
I love that.
I hadn't seen that. But it's also funny that the woman who Dear Miss Sassy's owner is still supporting Trump and Vance, even in spite of all of the chaos they've unleashed on her small, quaint town in middle America.
It is weird to me, right? So, like, there's a Republican governor of the state that has been saying this is BS from day one, right? There's the mayor, the sheriff, the city manager, all these people, the head of the wildlife, the parks program. Everyone said this is BS. Donald Trump and JD Vance have stirred up all of this stuff in this town. And everyone's like, oh, I guess that's just how, like, I don't think anyone's really mad at him for doing this. And it strikes me as weird that they wouldn't be a little bit like, well, how can we trust this guy when he is, I forget the principle, but there is a principle, and you'll see conservatives cite this a lot, where, I forget the name of this, but like, let's say you're an expert in architecture and you read something in the newspaper and you're like, well, this isn't true. And then that sort of opens your eyes that, like, well, if the media got this wrong, maybe everything they got is wrong. And I wonder why isn't there a similar phenomenon taking place where, like, wait a second, Trump is lying about our town. I know for a fact it's a lie. He's exploiting us here. Maybe maybe this is a microcosm of what he's doing everywhere. And yet there doesn't seem to be a lot of reflection or introspection about that.
Well, at this point, they're just too bought in, right? I mean, how is this any different to any of the other gigantic, obvious lies that Trump has told in the past 8 years? And I think, if anything, when people see that and think, oh, well, okay, I think people think one of two things. Either A, well, he wasn't lying, he just got the facts wrong. But if he got the facts wrong, it's because he was concerned about a real problem, and illegal immigration is a real problem, and maybe somewhere else in the country, Haitian migrants really are breaking into our basements and stealing our sweet little cats.
I think it's in Canton, Ohio, actually, because that's where, to the degree that there was even a germ of truth to any of this, none of it happened in Springfield for whatever reason. But to your point, JD Vance, I think, tacitly admitted on CNN this past weekend that if he needs to embellish or create a story to prove the larger point, then the ends justify the means, right?
No, exactly. Well, it's all part of the kayfabe, right? As we've talked about many times with our boundless supply of pro wrestling references on this program, Matt. But really, I mean, we laugh because it is obviously a funny story. It's a risible story, so you can't help but laugh. But at the same time, it very much isn't funny. It's very much concerning and very much alarming, because if Trump loses in November, then apply this to a much larger scale, and and implemented to a much more severe degree than what we saw in 2020. Trump's lies are only going to get bigger. His efforts to overturn the election and the way he's going to whip up a frenzy among his supporters are only going to be stronger. The reaction among his supporters is only going to be wilder and more paranoid and vitriolic. And again, and especially if we don't learn the result of the election until a few days afterward, as was the case in 2020, and which Time and a few other outlets have reported is probably going to happen this week because of mail-in voting and the procedures around how those votes are verified and processed. All of that is going to feed in to Trump taking this same approach, to Trump employing this same tactic, but on a national scale, and in a scale that could actually have significant deleterious consequences for the entire electoral process, and not just this one small town.
Well, a movement and a political party that buys into these wild stories is the type of movement and political party that attracts a lot of weirdos and scoundrels and freaks. And again, weird is the right word. I think that Tim Walz sort of injected into this, and we've seen it. And look, we've seen Donald Trump in the past blow elections. After he lost in 2020, he goes down to Georgia, basically sabotages 2 Senate elections in January of 2021. Then he, remember, endorsed a whole bunch of weird people like Carrie Lake and Herschel Walker, I think in 2022. Republicans lost a lot of seats that they should have won. And maybe history is repeating itself, right? Trump once again has Carrie Lake running for Senate in Arizona. And he has attacked Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Georgia happens to be one of the most important states that Donald Trump needs to win. And now there's this latest story. I'm sure you saw this. Mark Robinson, he's the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. He's running for governor, and he's been embroiled in a bunch of scandals. And the latest one is the greatest one. This is MSNBC telling the story, and then we'll talk on the other end.
The state Republican Party really wants its candidate, Mark Robinson, to drop out. Even by the standards of Donald Trump's hand-picked freaks and geeks, Mark Robinson is a uniquely terrible candidate. He's got a open history of rank anti-Semitism, along with a bunch of other bigoted statements. He's made grotesque anti-abortion ads accusing women of not being responsible enough to keep your skirt down. Just 2 weeks ago, he had to deny a report that he was once a 5-nights-a-week attendee at multiple porn shops, where he often brought a pizza in a private booth with him.
Who among us?
That had been a known quantity. Seemed fine with Trump and his party. And yet, this afternoon, we started to hear this chatter that Republicans, including members of the Trump campaign, had suddenly decided it was time for Robinson to go. And then we learned why. Around 3:30 p.m., CNN dropped a report that Robinson made a series of inflammatory comments on a pornography website's message board more than a decade ago, in which he referred to himself as a, quote, black Nazi and expressed support for reinstating slavery. The extensive and thorough report by the excellent reporters at CNN provides overwhelming evidence that Mark Robinson was indeed the one making the comments on the website Nude Africa, including the fact that he signed up for an account using his actual name, Mark Robinson. He used the same username and email address for other accounts on multiple other websites. In the report, Robinson says he wants to own slaves and calls himself a Nazi, wrote that he preferred the former leader of Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, over the leadership in Washington during the administration of Barack Obama. I'd take Hitler over any of the expletive that's in Washington right now. Also, Robinson graphically described his own sexual arousal as an adult from the memory of secretly peeping on women in public gym showers as a 14-year-old. Robinson recounted the story as a memory he said he still fantasized about. What's more, Robinson said he enjoyed watching transgender pornography, a review of archived messages found in which he also referred to himself as a, quote, perv.
Did I mention that North Carolina is also one of the most important states that Donald Trump needs to win, and that Donald Trump has praised and endorsed this guy, called him, I guess, Martin Luther King on steroids or something? It's crazy. And look, I tweeted this out today, and I think it bears repeating. So first of all, for all have sinned, we're all sinners, crooked timber of humanity. We live in a fallen world. Everybody does bad stuff. Secondly, for eternity, politicians have been embroiled in scandals. This predates Trump. It's a bipartisan phenomenon. Democrats, Republicans have done a lot of weird, crazy, horrible things. But it's hard not to look around at the MAGA movement and suspect that Donald Trump has served as a magnet and a permission structure attracting. I mean, look no further than Laura Loomer. That was a big story last week, that Trump is, who knows what kind of relationship he's having with this conspiracy theorist, Laura Loomer. Trump had lunch, a couple Thanksgivings ago with Nick Fuentes. There's the Kanye West thing. I've seen pictures of Trump with Jeffrey Epstein and P. Diddy. So it's a weird thing. Not all of these people are involved in politics, but they seem to all be around Donald Trump.
Yeah, eventually it becomes a pattern, man. I don't
Yes.
know. I'm starting to sense a trend here, but I'm not sure what the common denominator could be. No, I don't know though. I mean, we had a black Klansman, right? Why can't we have a black Nazi as the governor of
Yeah, that's not a
one of
bad
the-
movie, by the way. If have you seen the Black Klansman
a
or whatever
while
that
ago?
was
but
called?
yeah, I remember enjoying it. Yeah, I
That's
think
pretty
it's one
good.
of the better things Spike Lee has made. And this almost feels like the premise for a Spike Lee movie, so he may just adapt it in a few years. Um, No, I think that's absolutely right. They really did do an extensive dive into his past in that report, didn't they? They spared nothing in the quotes they pulled and what they found. Um, I think what what's really illuminating, well, not even illuminating. We talk about how Trump attracts these people. Of course he does, and of course he's emboldened this sort of thing because because Trump's own background is replete with exactly this same kind of sleaze, exactly these same kind of scandals, exactly these same kind of patterns and dramatic events, but would be for any other human being in the public eye ignominious to the point of potentially ruining their career or at least shutting down their career for some time. And yet, what did for Trump, these sorts of things helped him get elected, or at least like the Access Hollywood tape and any number of other things you could mention didn't impede him from getting elected, weren't detrimental to him in any way. If anything, they helped him because a lot of the people who were repelled by those things in 2016 decided to just stay home and not vote because they thought he was guaranteed to lose. So why wouldn't all of these other freaks come out of the woodwork and feel like they're guaranteed to be just as
I
successful?
mean, remember just the other week the story about Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and
Right?
Dave Rubin, taking money from some Russian cutout to do propaganda. It's just you can't even keep track. Laura Loomer, you can't even keep track of all these people.
I don't know. I'm still quite sad that Mehmet Oz didn't win. In was it Pennsylvania he ran in? I think we really lost out on that one. He could have been a future leader. I'm disappointed about that.
Well, there's all these scandals. I mean, so Olivia Nuzzi, whom I would call her a friend, I know her a little bit. She was embroiled in a scandal where she had some sort of a relationship with RFK Jr. And she's, I guess, been placed on leave from her media outlet. Matt Gaetz, I guess there's some scandal brewing about him again, having to do with underage women. And I don't know what is in the water this week, but did you have any thoughts on any of these stories, or would it be better for us just to move along?
well, the latest Matt Gaetz. I mean, I guess we'll stick with allegations, even though the story is coming from a legal brief. But Gaetz is another one with a pattern who, even before he held elected office, there's demonstrable evidence that he's always been a sleaze, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise. But with a lot of this sort of thing, it's almost at a certain point it almost becomes benumbing. I mean, the question is what sort of consequence to the presence of these sorts of people in political life and their association with Trump and Vance, what sort of consequence does that have for their electoral chances? How many of the Americans who are going to decide this election, how many of the independent voters and so on, who haven't made up their minds yet or could still go either way, how many of those people who haven't already been repulsed enough by some of the other freak shows that Trump has kept around him to decide not to vote for him will finally be dissuaded from voting for him by the presence of things like this? I think that's the open question, but again, it's a depressing indictment not only of our political culture in general, but also of how the direction the right has gone in recent years. That this sort of thing is becoming so commonplace in the Republican Party.
I don't. Did you see this video? I don't think I'm going to play it. But Melania Trump, I guess, has a book out or something, and she put up this video where she talked about how she's been under attack for these nude photos she's taken. Now,
Right.
here's the thing. I haven't heard anybody criticize her for this for like 5 years or maybe longer, but
It was
I
a
don't
story
understand.
in it was a story in 2016, right? I
Yeah,
vaguely remember it
right.
from back then.
So where are you? I mean, are you pro Melania nude photo? Are you anti? Do you think are you into slut shaming, or do you not want to yuck people's yum? Where are you? Or maybe you're a prude. Maybe you think maybe like I don't know. Some of JD Vance's friends probably would like to censor her activities. Where are you on this spectrum?
I'm sure many of JD Vance's friends would like to censor her activities while privately very much enjoying their activities when
That's
no
the
one else
thing.
is
Yeah,
looking.
yeah.
No, I'm sure many people listening won't believe this. I have not seen any of the nude photos. But I don't. I mean, I don't think this. I don't think that story. I mean, she was a model, and I saw the comment that she made defending the photos that the human form is
Yeah.
beautiful. We should
I've tried
celebrate
that
it.
on my parents. My parents were not open to that.
The human form is central to art, which I think is a fair point. Although I don't know if you can really consider things like Playboy to contribute to the grand sum of Western civilization or anything like that. But I don't think that is a particularly significant story one way or the other. However, I do think to tie it back in to the North Carolina stuff and to a lot of these other people who have actively said insane things. The whole thing there in the CNN report about the comments Mark Jameson made on the message board. What was it, a decade ago? On the one hand, right, in any other.
Mark Robinson.
Yeah, Mark Robinson, right. What did I I didn't say Mark Ruffalo, did I? Or
I
something
think
like
you
that.
said Mark Jameson, I think.
That's a different story.
I just don't want to, accuse someone else of being a black Nazi if they're not, I just
The comments Mark Robinson made on the message board in other situations, right? Almost again, if we lived in a more normal political climate, I would potentially lean towards saying, look, a big part of the American ideal, right, is we believe in redemption, we believe in forgiveness, we believe that people can change, that people shouldn't be held back from pursuing the American dream, from pursuing fulfillment and accomplishment and self-actualization and so on, based on mistakes that they have made, and that's evident throughout American history. But but that would be the case if he had made ridiculous comments like that a decade ago and had done nothing else that was remotely problematic or concerning since. However, that is not the case. And when
yeah.
when you tie in and when you compare those comments to the whole slew of ridiculous and abhorrent things he has said in recent years, I think they speak to his character and the enduring aspects of his character in a way that should certainly be taken into consideration for for a political candidate.
Well, there's also the hypocrisy, like he's against abortion, but he said something like he doesn't care if people have abortions as long as they make a sex tape he can watch. He watched trans porn, but was very, and this goes to something, the joke you kind of made a second ago about how JD Vance's friends would try to ban Melania's nudity while enjoying it privately. It does seem like there's a weird sort of like suppression that takes place. I feel like, for example, this is like maybe a related phenomenon. All these guys who want you to know how tough they are, how manly and tough they are also always Trump supporters, but also oftentimes involved in things like there was one like bodybuilder Trump supporter who was into like cuckoldry, and we saw this. What was it? Who was it? I forget which. I don't want to say the wrong pastor, but it was a famous the Liberty University guy who was involved in some of this stuff. So I think the hypocrisy angle makes it, more of a political story. And then just the fact that, like, if someone wants to go out of their way to prove like how manly and how tough they are or how righteous they are, I always start to wonder why. Why do you need to like front so much and put that out there so much? is there, it's like the guy who drives the fancy car, you know, like, are you compensating for some other, like, something else? I don't know. What's up with that?
Yeah, truly virtuous people don't really feel the need to brag about their virtues in public, I don't think. I mean, on the hypocrisy point, I think the hypocrisy angle too is an effective political weapon for Democrats, and Republicans are very much playing into the hands of Democrats in that regard, because on hot button social issues like abortion, the sorts of social issues that are very much still very much going to be fundamental to a lot of the major elections in this country and a lot of the close elections in this country potentially for quite some time, while both sides of the aisle try to figure out what to do in a post-Dobbs environment. If you know if Democrats can employ the line of attack that, look, Republicans want to take your rights away, but secretly they've been indulging in legalized abortion, and they've been just as legalized abortion has played just as essential of a role in their lives as it may have had for the people they condemn. That's going to carry, I think, a lot of sway on independent voters and voters and voting groups like women who are concerned about these issues.
So the story for CNN was broken by Andrew Kaczynski, who I think once upon a time, I think he was a Republican Oppo researcher at the RNC. I'm talking about like 10, 15 years ago. And he's like so good at this sort of sleuthing. He's very good at digging up stuff people have done, especially digital fingerprint stuff. I'm sure he's taken a lot of people down over the years. So it suggests to me this is legit and real. But I saw an interview. Kaczynski interviewed Mark Robinson. And Robinson's just denying it and saying, like, I don't know how they did it, but this is a deep fake, or this is, you know, and I do think, like, in this modern era, the average person might be like, well, maybe someone could fake that. You know, maybe someone could set you up and like make it look like you're guilty when you're not. I don't think that's the case here. I'm pretty confident that the reporting is right, but I think that if you're accused of something, you could just say like, no, I was hacked, and you know, you may not get away with it among people who are experts and really know their stuff, but will the average Republican voter in North Carolina,
Right.
You know, who will they believe?
No, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, it obviously doesn't work in this case because of all the comments that Robinson has made since then and in recent years, but lend an awful lot of credence to the fact that the contents of the CNN report are not faked and are real. But I mean, in other situations, if isolated stories like this do break out, then absolutely, I think you're onto something. And I also think that the culture we've been living in, especially since 2020, but arguably since the mid 2010s, the censorious aspects of American culture that we've seen a resurgence of in that time, have very much emboldened this sort of thing. Because in a climate where it's impossible oftentimes to even have disagreements and to even have open conversations without, this goes both ways, without one side turning into hysterics and trying to demonize their opponent, the best solution for a lot of people who get caught up in the frenzy of cancel culture, or the frenzy of a mob coming for them, is to simply brazen through the situation, and to either deny that they did anything and just refuse to accept it and to get through it that way, or to say, yeah, I did this, get over it. Right? I did this, and what are you going to do? And by doing that, it's made people stronger, and it made Trump stronger. Right? How does Trump respond to situations like this? Trump doesn't even need to say that things were fake. He just needs to own it and say that either the media is against him, or look, they're coming after me because they want to come after you, and it plays into the hands of his base, and it only makes his base more committed to him and more bought in. Again, more bought into the kayfabe, to make another gratuitous wrestling reference.
Just remember, they're not coming after Mark Robinson. They're coming after you. He's just standing in their way.
That's true. That's true. Well, who hasn't, who hasn't, as you said, Matt, taken a pizza into the back of a pawn shop 5 times a week for a significant portion of their life?
Okay. In other news,
Anyway,
in other news, you mentioned.
I would just like to say we've come a long way from Lincoln Douglas, haven't we? From grand debates over the meaning of the American experiment and how the American proposition should be followed through on and thought about and what it represents. To did the prospective governor of North Carolina really eat pizza in a sex shop 5 times a week for 10 years?
You mentioned that we didn't get to talk about the debate last week. It went well for Kamala Harris overall, and I wanted to share. This is a clip, Joe Rogan talking about how it went, and I think it's worth seeing.
Bro, I forgot. Let me tell you, before I say anything, I just want to say, whoever's helping her, whoever's coaching her, whoever's the puppet master running the strings, you did a amazing job.
She did a great job.
They did an amazing job from the moment Biden drops out, forcing Biden to drop out. Right, whatever they're doing, whoever's writing those speeches, getting her to deliver them, coaching her, she's nailing it. She nailed that one speech. She's like, "Say it to my face."
Oh, yeah,
everybody's cheering.
Yeah, she nailed it, dude.
And then last night, to me, when I was like, "Oh my God, this is jujitsu," where she's like, "If you go to his rallies, his crowds are boring. They're tired. They all leave
early.
My crowds are the best crowds. I have the #1 crowd." He couldn't help himself.
And she got him. She baited him on that. She walked him right into it.
100%. 100%. See, the difference in that debate was not a difference in like who's going to have better policies, who's going to be better for the country. The difference in the debate, in my opinion, was who was better prepared. She was way better prepared. And even when it came to answering tough questions, instead of answering, she would just say things that she believes.
Yeah, sure.
And they sounded real good.
Yeah, that's
the soundbite.
That's called being a savvy politician.
It's also called being someone who's working with a team versus someone who's like, they said Trump, that deal was the best deal. They've never seen a deal like this before. They said, "How did you put that deal together?"
People thought that was just brilliant. Yeah, I know. He was like,
"That's."
So but I would say not only was the difference that Kamala Harris was more prepared, it's that one candidate has the self-discipline to stay on message, and one candidate cannot resist taking the bait. Donald Trump couldn't resist. I don't know if you got to see it, but she really did bait him. And the biggest one, the funniest one, was about crowd size, where she got him defending how big his crowds are. Let me just show you this as well, because Trump gave a rally this week, and I think this shows you how much he cares about the adulation.
So I'd call up my wife, and I'd say, "Baby, who could draw crowds? Nobody can draw crowds like me. Nobody, not even close. I'm the greatest of all time, maybe greater even than Elvis, because Elvis had a guitar. I don't have a guitar. Elvis had a guitar. I don't have the privilege of a guitar."
That's another direct quote from Lincoln, right? Elvis had a guitar. I don't have a guitar. That's from the Gettysburg Address, I think. No,
all right.
I think. Just quickly to your point about the debate. I mean, I thought the debate was an absolutely miserable experience, especially for the first 20 minutes. I didn't think either of them looked. I wouldn't say either of them looked good by the normal standards of what should be presidential and by what anyone should consider worthy of their vote, right? However, I do think that Kamala won, and I don't see how you could argue against that, because if you would, again, who was the debate supposed to, who should either of them have been focused on influencing in the debate, right? Again, as we've been hammering home for weeks now, the people who are going to flip the election. And the people who are going to flip the election, what were they going to respond to? I think exactly what you said: self-discipline, self-restraint, and an image and a patina that seemed presidential, that seemed coherent, that seemed well considered, right? And Trump seemed like none of those things. Trump held it together for around the first 20 minutes, and it was largely back and forth. I thought the first 20 minutes were more or less just boring. But then once Kamala got going, and as you said, goaded him in to losing his temper, he never recovered, and he seemed like a bloviating, senile old man, which is exactly how he was able to portray what he was able to portray Biden as earlier in the election cycle. But now the tables have turned, and he has nothing to work with besides his fables about eating cat. Besides his small town fables about the plight of cats and dogs.
Well, and speaking of the debate, one thing we learned is that Kamala Harris packs heat. She is a gun owner. And this came up again, I think it was Thursday night, I think, when she did an interview with Oprah Winfrey.
You said you have guns. No, at the debate. I'm
a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that.
If someone breaks into my house, they're getting shot. She's trying to win me over, guy. I don't know. I feel like she's running a campaign to get my support.
But even there, right, she seems more human. She seems more authentic. You can say and you can insist that, oh, it's all put on and other people are pulling the strings and she's an empty suit and just a vessel for the nefarious deep state overlords of the Democratic Party, whoever they may be. But look, even if that is the case, it's working. She looks good. Not only does she look infinitely better than Biden did, but she looks infinitely better and infinitely more organic and presentable and likable than Hillary Clinton did.
Yes,
and if Trump... way
more likable. And I think there is a femininity that is also... Remember Donald Trump keeps talking about how good looking or how like beautiful she is or something, but there's a likability. We used to mock her for that laugh, and now it's joy. She's exuding joy. Like she was having fun there. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I've never seen a politician. I can't remember seeing a politician who's turned their image around as much as she has.
I think, no, that's a good point. And again, likability is key because one thing Donald Trump has never been is likable. You could argue that he's charismatic in the way he appeals to the people who...
I think he can be likable. He's got a funny side to him sometimes.
I think he can be charming, right, in his own unique way. But why did Trump win in 2016? It wasn't because he was likable. It was simply because he was less dislikable to enough people than Hillary Clinton, right? They just hated Hillary Clinton more. And in 2020, again, both candidates were unpopular, but Biden seemed more likable than Trump. Biden seemed more composed and like a figure of greater decorum and restraint and dignity than Trump, and so Biden won for that reason. And if this again turns into a referendum on how unpleasant is Donald Trump and how dangerous is Donald Trump for the country, which is exactly what Harris has been able to turn it into in recent weeks, and clips like that illustrate why, then he's going to lose in November, and he'll have only himself to blame.
Guy, before we get out of here, I heard you finally went and saw the Reagan movie. So now we've both seen it. What'd you think?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you thought. I mean,
look, okay, so I'll tell you what I thought, because I took my 11-year-old son to see it too.
Oh, did you
and
really?
I wrote a piece about it for U.S. News and World Report where number one, I liked it a lot. It is not Citizen Kane. It is not Casablanca. It is not a great work of art. It is obviously a hagiography. But I liked it, partly because I like Reagan, partly because I like the nostalgia for the 80s. The conceit is, the way they told the story is this KGB agent played by Jon Voight is telling the story of how the Cold War was lost to America and how the Soviet Union went down. And he was charged with following Reagan for decades since he was in Hollywood. And he's telling the story. So it's an excuse to give the entire biography of Reagan. And they really sandwiched everything. Any Reagan story you've ever heard is probably in there somewhere. But overall, I really liked it. And my big takeaway was, wow, Reagan was a great guy. He had moral clarity. He really believed in things. He didn't like the Russians. He fought against the propaganda and the infiltration instead of supporting it. And he was a decent, wholesome person overall. That and juxtaposed with Trump, it was a stark contrast.
See, it's interesting. I deliberately didn't read your piece, Matt, because I have a
because I never read your pieces.
well, that yes, but that's academic. But also because I have a review of it coming out in the Dispatch this weekend, which will probably be antipodal to your review because I thought it was terrible. But it's interesting to hear you say you liked it because you like Reagan.
Wait, you thought it was terrible?
I did, but
Okay.
it's interesting to hear you say you liked it because you liked Reagan. I didn't like it because I like Reagan, right? Like obviously, I admire Reagan for a lot of the same reasons that you do, and I think Reagan. I think what's most fascinating about Reagan, and the article hasn't gone through the final edit yet, so I don't know if this will stay in there, but I put this in, talked about this a bit in there. To me, what's most interesting about Reagan is like a lot of great achievers of the American dream, right, is that his life was very much defined by self-invention. And the real Reagan and his inner life and his true personality was very much a mystery to most people who knew him. And when biographers have tried to take on the challenge of capturing what he was really like and conveying that in print, I think they've largely come up short.
Edmund Morris being the most infamous example.
Most infamous example, right? And that book is just a disaster on all levels. But I think some of the other more straightforward biographies of Reagan, I mean, most of them are fine, aren't necessarily bad books. But of all the ones I've read, I read H.W. Brands' book. I've read one or two others, and I found most of them to be largely superficial. There's something about them that just doesn't quite work. They can't really. You can read those books and obviously learn a lot about what Reagan did and what the context of the time was like, but you can't get any real but you'll never really get a sense for what it was like to be in a room with him, to know him, to talk to him. All of this is a very long-winded way of saying that I thought that what I would have liked to see out of the movie is that. And I think the visual language of cinema and the cinema as an art form as opposed to literature is really perhaps more auspiciously suited to balancing the contradictory features of his personality, right, in a way that a book could not. But I thought that Reagan throughout the entire film just came across as a caricature, and as did all of the other supporting actors too. I hated the way Nancy Reagan was portrayed in it.
I think their task was incredibly difficult.
That is true.
Incredibly difficult. And I think what you're talking about like next level stuff, man. You're talking about like Daniel Day-Lewis as Reagan. That's what you're talking about.
That is true.
So I'm more forgiving. I had lower expectations. I thought it was going to be really bad, and it exceeded my expectations. And I think it, again, it's not Citizen Kane, but I enjoyed it. It was, and my son now is probably the leading expert of the 1980s and Ronald Reagan in his middle school. So, but I look forward to reading your piece, and here's what I'd be interested in. For those out there who are watching or listening, I'd love to hear some comments. Like, who's right? Is Guy right? Is Matt right? I'd like to know what you thought. But I think, honestly, our difference of opinion has a lot more to do with, like, our kind of expectations realistically of what this film could actually deliver.
Yes. So it's I think that's a fun experiment too. So here's the thing. What's the draft I wrote, I'm not sure how much it will evolve in the edit, but the draft I wrote was very bitchy, in part because it's just, once you get into the groove, it's easier to write bitchy criticism than it is to write.
I know.
Exactly. But it is to write positive criticism. I will say at no point during the movie was I ever bored. And I think it clocks in at about 2.5 hours. It didn't feel like that to me. But I also, I will say, leaving all of that grand stuff about Reagan to one side, right? I wasn't impressed by most of the acting. I didn't think Dennis Quaid. I think Dennis Quaid's a fine actor, but I didn't think he captured it. I hated Penelope Ann Miller as Nancy Reagan, and I didn't think there was anything impressive about the cinematography, the dialogue, the score. It all felt like a made-for-TV movie, and I thought the pacing was completely off too. So I'm interested to read your take, and I'm interested to see what other people think, and where most people, especially since most people I'm sure who are listening to this like us, like Reagan, and want to see Reagan well represented in popular culture, where they come down on it.
So let me just say, my piece is not a proper movie review. I used seeing the movie as a jumping off point to write an essay about comparing and contrasting Reagan and Trump and all that. But I did get into the movie, and like I say, I did enjoy it. But if you are, if you have like sophisticated high art taste, if you're the kind of person who goes to the E Street Cinema, then you're not gonna. This is not a work of art. This is a regular, more of a popcorn kind of movie, I think. But I did like it. I did enjoy it, and I will say one thing. You tell me. I felt like they went out of their way to sandwich every story about Reagan I've ever heard, everything, every big event of his presidency, and except one. I don't think the Challenger disaster is mentioned at all.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And on top of that, they make a big deal out of, I think there's a young speechwriter named Dana. I believe that's Dana Rohrabacher, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But this young speechwriter is, really prominent in this movie. I don't think Peggy Noonan's mentioned at all. And she wrote the Challenger speech. She wrote the D-Day speech. I mean, two of the greatest speeches. If you did like the top 10 political speeches from the 20th century, I think those two are on the list,
Yes.
I don't think she's mentioned or referenced at all. And this Dana speechwriter gets a lot of publicity. And I wonder if that's an intentional slight. I don't know.
That's interesting. No, that didn't even cross my mind, but no, the Challenger isn't in there. And I was surprised. Iran-Contra is in there. It's glossed over, but they do reference it and dwell on it a bit. I also thought, I was surprised that the climax of the movie is to tear down this wall speech, and it's obviously presented very much in the fashion of rah-rah patriotic American cheese, like you'd expect, which I know you and I can both get behind and enjoy. I was surprised though that we didn't see Peter Robinson during the tear down this wall scene either. I thought we would, because some people are in there. Mike
Deaver,
Deaver is in there. Is George Schultz in there? Others like that. But yeah, it's very much and I mean that is the demanding task.
James Baker is in there.
Ed Meese is in there, I think.
Ed Meese,
that is the demanding task, right? Of trying to, how do you approach, especially someone a life like Reagan's, if you don't want to concentrate a movie like that on his presidency, but you want to approach his entire life, how do you effectively represent everything he went through in his life and cover it in appropriate detail in the span of a reasonably paced and reasonably long movie, right? I mean, there's no way you could.
I mean, this had everything. It's got him being a lifeguard on Rock Island or whatever. It's got him being like a baseball announcer. It's got the story about when he's playing at Eureka College and the African-American players on his team are not allowed to stay at the hotel, so the Reagans welcome them into their home. It's got the story about the pony. It's got, if pretty much, if there's anything that happened, it's in there. And I still think they made it work. So I stand by it, and I challenge you to a duel, sir.
Well, should we meet in Weehawken this weekend and settle our differences, Matt?
let us know, who do you agree with, who's right, who's wrong, or go see the movie and then let us know. Guy Denton, you drive us wild, we drive you crazy. It's that time of day again. It's cold gin time.
I'm off to drink water out of a cold gin branded bottle as usual.
Well, next time we'll have to record later in the day, and we can have some cold gin as we tape this. Always a pleasure, Guy Denton. Are you going to actually be back here next week, or are you taking another week off?
I will indeed. How could I possibly keep away from the thrilling political stories that we're faced with on a weekly basis, man? I'll be sticking with it until the election. I guarantee you that.
All right, I'm going to go visit some message boards where my moniker is Guy Denton. So, what could possibly go wrong? Let's just say that Mark Robinson has found himself at the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong stop. See you next week, man.
Until then, Matt. If you like what you heard here today, please make sure to follow the show, subscribe to the show, leave a like, review the show wherever you get your podcast, and also please smash that like button, or whatever the people my age are saying. I don't know. I am a Kiss fan after all. But nonetheless, you can also follow us on X at WrongStuffPod, or drop us a note. Fawning praise or scornful disdain, we accept both, at the WrongStuffPod, all one word, at gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We're looking forward to next time.